Valve. Today, a respected company in video game industry that make many cry for their next big game. But how did this come to be? Who are the people and reasons behind it? Why did it happen? In an era dominated by fast-paced first-person shooters, Valve came out with one of their own that would change the industry forever. This story begins back in 1996 and with Microsoft, as lots of stories do. After working for the company for almost a decade, Microsoft employees Gabe Newell and Mike Arrington were so impressed with games such as Doom and Quake during the mid-90s that the will of taking the same direction began to emerge in their minds. Inspired by their co-worker Michael Obrash that left Microsoft to work on id Software Quake, Gabe Newell and Mike Arrington leave the company cashing in their stock. The goal was set: produce video games, but ideas were still to emerge. Nevertheless, the lack of ideas in 1996, Gabe Newell and Mike Arrington found Valve and start working on their first project. The days of sprites and pixels were over, the PC hardware industry was going crazy, new technologies appeared from night to day, 2D graphic cards were a thing of the past. This was when 3D graphics and accompanying game development took off in a big way. The dominant and mighty 3DFX launched its legendary Voodoo 2, which provided hardware 3D acceleration for the masses. The time for 3D gaming was now. Inspired by the admiration that they had for Quake, the direction was set. 3D games were their favorite genre, and the feeling was that there was room for improvement. One major flaw that both identified was the lack of a good narrative in action games. Yes, they had great graphics, great sound, they were fast-paced and provided immediate action to the player, but the story was not quite there. It was decided, as fans of action games, the goal was to create an alternative inside that genre, with a significant emphasis on the story that suited the action and captivated the player with compelling characters and narrative. This was a risky move. Why reinvent the wheel? The formula for action games was working, but the challenge was set. Although both had experience in programming, the capabilities of writing a compelling narrative for a video game was not there, so what to do? In the typical action game from that time, the player would be presented with the story right at the very beginning. The objective was to revert this, to tell a story that unveils gradually as the player makes progress, getting to know new characters. Inspired by Stephen King's The Mist, Newell wanted the same horror experience. Valve recruited horror novelist Mark Laidlaw for the job of creating an immersive story to support the gameplay. While working on their very first project, the search for a publisher begins. Valve sends images and small demos to publishers waiting for an answer. Most of those publishers saw the project as being too ambitious and would simply not take the risk. But one of those publishers was Sierra. And since Newell had a friend who knew the founder of Sierra, Ken Williams, expectations were high. Sierra was on board with the idea. In fact, Sierra had been looking for a first-person action game for a while with no luck. This could work for both ways. Sierra had found its first-person shooter, while Valve had found its publisher. The new game would have its chance with this partnership. Half-Life was born.
Good morning and welcome to the Black Mesa Transit System. This automated train is provided for the security and convenience of the Black Mesa Research Facility personnel.
The production of the game was no easy task whatsoever. The vision that was created for Half-Life hit the wall of technical possibilities. An immersive story meant for full character speech, sophisticated AI, and physics. Valve got hands of id Software's engine for Quake. They worked around the engine, modified it, and a new engine was created, Gold Source. By 1997 the game was finished, ready, done, but something was missing. Valve knew that better was still possible and the game was completely scrapped. With a finished game, Valve started again from the very beginning. Valve spent another year working on the game. Slowly the puzzle was solved. AI, levels, characters, audio, everything was made from scratch, and Half-Life transformed from another average action game to what its creator had initially envisioned. The game was set to release in 1997, but the delay was real. Sierra wanted their new game and time was going by. Pressure was made and Half-Life first appeared in 1998 on Electronic Entertainment Expo, receiving the Game of the Show award. Sierra wanted the game finished for the end of the year. It had to be ready for the Christmas season and Valve had to work around the clock. Corners had to be cut, setbacks had to be overcome, like losing parts of the game with servers crapping out. It was a bumpy road for Half-Life. In November of 1998, very close to the deadline, Half-Life was launched and was rated Game of the Year by over 50 publications, and later receiving the Guinness World Record for the best-selling first-person shooter of all time.
They told me to make sure you headed down there as soon as you got into your hazard suit.
This is all nice, but what made Half-Life so great?
Welcome to the HEV Mark IV protective system.
The game revolutionized the industry. When players were used to pure action, Half-Life brought to the table the elements of adventure games. The days of just shoot everything that moves were over. Gamers were presented to an immersive story with compelling characters that set the foundations for the action to come and evolved with the gameplay. Suddenly, players had characters to empathize with. The game had a meaning, a purpose that was unveiled as the player progressed in the story. Dr. Gordon Freeman would come to be one of the most recognizable characters in video games as he makes his way out of Black Mesa after an experiment goes wrong. The game introduced storytelling in a first-person perspective. Gone were the cutscenes, and the player never leaves the eyes of Gordon Freeman. These were scripted sequences also in first person where the player doesn't lose control of the main character. Also introduced puzzle solving to the genre, where the player would also have to listen very carefully to other characters met along the way. It was an all-new thing. Gone were the levels of a typical first-person shooter, being replaced with chapters from a true story. It was like being inside of a book, participating in the story, seen through your own eyes. This kind of concern was from a different genre of games, and crossovers were considered unnatural and risky. Still, Valve took the risk to bring elements from different genres to a first-person shooter, and that risk completely paid off. It set the standard for future FPSs to come. From that moment on, a good narrative was mandatory in any video game. The game saw in 2001 ports made for the PlayStation 2 and the Dreamcast. Although the Dreamcast port was cancelled for reasons that do not concern this video, a version of the game can easily be found and can be played on the system. It also spawned spin-offs like Opposing Force, Blue Shift, and the super popular Counter-Strike, but that's a whole different story. A high-definition pack was also made by Gearbox to enhance the textures, and the game engine, providing a more pleasant and modern experience for the eyes. "20 years later, Half-Life as an experience still holds up today, and the same formula continues to be used. Everything that was refreshing or new about it can easily be found in every game today. Its method of storytelling was revolutionary at the time. The immersion in the world compared to other similar games. The fact that you never leave Gordon Freeman's viewpoint for a second. Half-Life became a benchmark for the industry."
For God's sake, open the silo door! They're coming for us! It's our only way out! Oh my God, we're doomed!
I seriously recommend Half-Life to everyone. So go to the nearest PC that can run the game, install Half-Life, install the high-definition pack from Gearbox for a better visual experience if you feel like it, and dive into the body and soul of Half-Life. And as long as you're there, check out my other videos on the channel. I have more PC things, game reviews, how to make your repros and more. Remember that subscribing is an option and always appreciated. You can also follow me in a non-creepy way on social media. As always, thank you very much for watching. Until my next video, take care.